Start with contracting sprites. Chapter 326, Cleansing Flame, Glazed Flame, Butterfly's Performance. Without a doubt, the holy flames was a fire element treasure. He looked around and saw the burning gazes of the other fire element sprites. But it wasn't a rule that only fire element sprites could comprehend something from holy flames. Therefore, it was very normal for Butterfly to have some comprehension. Like hell it was. Gurgle. Gurgle. The emerald green butterfly flapped its wings slightly. The butterfly flew in front of Su Hao and looked at him. It took out a small white glass bead from its skirt. The bead circled around its little hand. With a bang, Butterfly returned to its original form in the misty smoke, the size of a fist. Wisps of grey smoke floated out of nowhere and surrounded the ball. For a moment, the whole precious ball was like clouds and mist, like a dream. This state lasted for about dozens of seconds. The nature of the sea serpent chi that filled the treasure ball gradually changed, as if flames were thrown into a flammable gas. Instantly, raging orange flames attached to the white treasure ball and burned. The energy of the precious ball in the flames continued to be injected, and together with the illusionary transformation, it created the flame treasure ball. Butterfly had mastered this skill a few months ago. The first element in the world that could simulate change was fire, and now, its three precious balls could freely switch to the three elemental energies fire, water, and thunder. However, it still didn't look like much. The true power of the flame treasure ball was only equivalent to a fireball blasted out by an entry-level sprite. It couldn't even compare to Butterfly's random psychic sweep. Spiritual treasure ball and transformation bead and mirage energy bead and illusionary transformation was expanded. For the time being, it could be considered a secret manual of water fire thunder energy. Su Hao had once thought that it could only be used on magic transformations. It had no practical use. However, at this moment, the orange flames had subtle changes. Within the ordinary flames, traces of mysterious characteristics were still born. It was difficult for him to describe it with words, but his intuition told him that the characteristics of the ball's flames were the same as the holy flames. Butterfly had really comprehended the flames. Gurgle. Butterfly spun around in midair for 2 weeks, its cries carrying a sense of lightness and ease. It was the joy of solving a difficult question. After all, comprehending holy flames was also slightly difficult for Butterfly. Even if it had a trace of extraordinary characteristics, the power of the flame treasure ball was still trash. But it meant that it had broken the original limit and could continue to improve. It also meant that Su Hao had found the direction. Butterfly had returned to its old profession. It was talking about its own insights, the nature of the flames, how to understand holy flames, and so on. Its expression was very serious and all it needed now to become a lecturer was a pair of glasses. Butterfly had the aura of a lecturer. After hearing it, Su Hao seemed to have understood something. After all, he was a genius. It was just that as a human, and as an ordinary human who didn't cheat, his perception of energy was far less clear than that of sprites, so. Well, that was definitely the case. At this moment, Butterfly's detailed explanation made him suddenly enlightened. On the interface, the long-awaited, high-end reference answer finally appeared. It was the secret technique of the holy flame belonging to Butterfly. Gurgle. Butterfly wrapped up the lesson, and the burning flames on the precious ball were extinguished. Su Hao looked at the other little guys. He directly ignored the distracted big fat bear and dumb unicorn. In any case, he didn't expect them to understand. He only looked at Dazed Crow. After staring at it for a while, the Dazed Crow's head turned 90 degrees. Squawk! It still looked like it didn't understand a single word. You dumb crow! Suddenly, there was a tug on his pants leg. Su Hao lowered his head and discovered a pale hand reaching out from his shadow and pulling him. The corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. He was already used to similar scenes. It was a Yan. Can't you speak properly? Whoosh whoosh. Oh, so you also understood a little. Not bad, no, what? Su Hao was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He bent down directly, reached out to the shadow, held Ayan's head, and pulled it out. The black-robed Ayan, who was forced to come out from its shadow, could only stretch out his hand. A cluster of faint flames appeared on his fingertip. It also carried a very weak but detectable trait. Su Hao pondered. Everyone knew that sprites could learn unique skills of other elements apart from their own attributes, so he looked at Dazed Crow. As expected, you are too dumb to be part of the group. Squawk. Holy flames should be the highest level treasure he had seen so far. It was a treasure 1 or 2 levels higher than top-grade materials. On the interface, there was also very little information about holy flames. There was only one sentence. Magical flames with multiple characteristics. There was no information on where it came from, but just by looking at the luxurious fiery bird's attitude towards the holy flames, one could tell that it wasn't only the guardian of the holy flames, it was also taking the opportunity to constantly comprehend the glass flames. Even Fiery Bird valued the flames, so Su Hao naturally didn't hesitate to unlock the glazed flame ball. It wasn't expensive, only 11 intelligence points. The mid-level knowledge that surged into his mind was just a secret manual upgraded from comprehending the holy flames and combining it with the flame treasure ball. It was impossible to cultivate the real holy flames through this. According to the reference and answer in my mind, as long as there's some guidance, sprites can rely on their own continuous cultivation to master the weakened version of special flames, but cultivating by comprehending the holy flames is completely different from cultivating by yourself. The efficiency is dozens of times or even hundreds of times lower. He originally wanted to rely on his own hard work to modify cultivation methods suitable for Dazed Crow and Yama Ghost King, but this was a rare opportunity. He really didn't want to work hard on his own. Ding dong, 6 intelligence points deducted. Ding dong, 6 intelligence points deducted. The more detailed knowledge about the holy flames surfaced in his mind, filling in many details. He could say without being modest that he was now superior when it came to the understanding and comprehension of the glazed flames on the torch in front of him. Everyone here is. Cough, cough, I should keep a low profile. The originally difficult to capture magical rhythm was now abnormally clear in his perception. It was as if he could reach out and whoosh. Hey? Do I really have a superpower? Looking at the flames that suddenly rose on his palm, Su Hao discovered that he wasn't excited at all. Instead, he was slightly bored. You succeeded too, brother. The arrest officer Xia said as she held 2 balls of flames in her palms, constantly throwing them up and down. It was like she was performing acrobatics. At this point, there were clearly more than 1 or 2 people who had comprehended flames. No wonder I'm not excited at all. What's the point of life if you can't show off? As expected, I'm just an ordinary person. Near the torch was the Golden Eagle Federation team. Whoosh! Another genius looked at his sprite, comprehending some unique power of holy flames, and nodded approvingly and proudly. But when he looked up and saw the sun-like young man in front of him, with glass-colored flames burning between his hands, all his arrogance disappeared. Fighting alongside the sun often makes people doubt their own significance. Don't doubt it, we're all indeed insignificant. You, me, all of them. Time ticked by. The sun rose and fell. The whole venue had always been very quiet. Everyone, every sprite, was quietly thinking and comprehending. Halfway through, a staff member also brought over lunch boxes. But not many people ate. The less time they spent on eating, the more time they could spend on thinking and comprehending. What about hunger? It wasn't important. Everyone present was a master-level sprite trainer. It wasn't a big problem to starve for 2 to 3 meals. Smells so good. When the Sun escaped from the state of enlightenment, he felt hungry. It was because he had consumed too much energy. He picked up the lunch box, which was still warm, and started eating madly. Then, he looked at the time. It was already morning. Outside the stadium, the sun should have just risen. There wasn't much time left for comprehension. Sun felt a little regretful. But compared to others, my gains are definitely the greatest. He looked at his main battle sprite, the fire god soldier formed by flames. Its body already had some glazed colors. According to my estimation, if I can stay here for 3 days, the secret manual of the fire god soldier's glass body can be completely completed. However, the rest will only take some time. Every fire element sprite he contracted benefited from it, and their battle power increased visibly. Even Sun himself was a natural-born ability user. The Sun fire also increased by a level. When used on sprites, the increase in strength became even more terrifying. Finally, time's up. Duke Andre's words spread far and wide. Now, those who have comprehended the holy flames, stand here. Those who haven't, stand there. Many sprite trainers were awakened, just like how the examination time was already up, but the answers were still blank. Their expressions immediately became very anxious. But soon, they calmed down again. There was no other reason. Standing on the right, there weren't any sprites who could comprehend anything from the holy flames. There were simply too many sprite trainers. 90% of the people didn't gain anything. Despite that, these people were all still geniuses. Some were shocked at the difficulty of the assessment, while others were ashamed of themselves. At the end of the day, trash is still trash. Facing a cluster of flames, they didn't understand how to comprehend something just by staring at it. They looked to the left at those who claimed to have comprehended something. There was admiration mixed with doubt in their gaze. Duke Andre walked to the left area and swept his gaze across. "Come, show me what you've comprehended from the holy flames." The nearest young man was sweating a little as he looked at the bursting flame bat beside him. He saw milky white flames rising on the bursting flame bat's wings, burning, burning. However, Duke Andre continued to stare. After a while, he said, "This is your so-called comprehension. Isn't it? Tell me, what qualities did it comprehend?" It. Under the Duke's oppressive gaze, the nameless NPC youth panicked. He opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. He only walked to the opposite side with a look of shame. There were a few others with him. Knowing that they couldn't bluff their way through, they lowered their heads and secretly slipped away. Duke Andre ignored them, but in his heart, he labeled them as unworthy. They continued to test the results of the others. One by one, fire element sprites executed unique skills that they had just comprehended. Su Hao was also watching. The power of these fire element unique skills wasn't strong, but whether they possessed some characteristics of holy flames could be sensed at a glance. Glass flame that enhances characteristics? Not bad. Duke Andre, who walked in front of a flaming divine hound, praised. He saw that the flaming divine hound's fluffy hair was stained with some glazed colors. Su Hao opened the interface and took a look. Flaming divine hound, glass flame enhancement. It was Xia. Her other sprites had also comprehended the glass flame enhancement. It's different from the characteristics comprehended by Butterfly and the others. It was quite interesting. From the same cluster of flames, different people, different sprites, could comprehend completely different things from it. At this moment, not far away, a fire god soldier pressed its palms together. Whoosh! Amidst a wave of flames, a small half of its body turned into glass color. It was similar to the glazed light enhancement model of the flaming divine hound. But just the visual impact and general perception alone was enough for one to tell that the enhancement of the fire god soldier was much higher than that of the flaming god hound. They weren't on the same level. Very good, to actually be able to evolve the glass body to this extent in a short period of time. Duke Andre praised. Sun raised his hands again, 2 clusters of flames appearing in his palms. Grand Duke, please take a look. Oh? It's actually a flame with healing characteristics, and you comprehended it yourself. When used on a sprite, it's equivalent to giving a sprite a passive ability that can continuously recover. Very good. When Sun heard this, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Even though he had expected to come first, he was still very happy to be praised by a big shot like the Grand Duke. He couldn't help but cast his gaze towards Su Hao. At this moment, the dazed crow made a squawk sound. It focused and held its breath. The feather saber lengthened and slashed out a blade light with some glazed colors. The power amplification has the characteristics of a broken armor. Duke Andre nodded slightly. Actually, you're already pretty good. It's just that it's impossible for anyone of the same age to know more about fire than me. The Sun's smile grew even wider. But at this moment, Su Hao, who only had one fire element sprite, said, Grand Duke, please wait a moment. Then, Su Hao took out a black-robed sprite from the shadow. Come, show your flames. Flames? What flames? Wasn't it a ghost element sprite? The Sun wasn't the only one who had the same thought. All of them widened their eyes and looked at him suspiciously. White, yellow, and orange flames emerged from the pale palm. It gave them a clearer feeling than the previous flaming spirit crow. Purification characteristic. Interesting. A ghost element sprite actually comprehended the purification characteristic. Not bad, not bad. Anything else? Duke Andre asked. He was just asking casually, but... Yes, of course. Su Hao looked at Butterfly. Begin your performance. Grand Duke. In his eyes, a white precious ball flew over. Suddenly, glass-colored flames leaped up. It burned quietly. The characteristics it possessed, after careful observation, were amplification and purification can be alternated between 2 different characteristics at will. The 3 precious balls with glazed flames kept changing. Wisps of flames interweaved, and under his perception, the Duke discovered that the other elements in the surroundings were all dispelled. It had a domineering aura that could purify everything. It was already very proficient in using the flames of purification. After dozens of seconds, the performance ended. The glass flames were extinguished, and the 3 precious balls flew back into Butterfly's hands. In the hands of a wood element sprite. A wood element sprite. Wood element. Wood. How can a wood element sprite like you understand fire better than a fire element sprite? The Sun, who was very knowledgeable, suddenly couldn't understand this world. Chapter 327, Interrogation of the Mind, Charging Ahead. After the Holy Flame Comprehension Assessment ended, the participants of the Battle of Inheritance received a day off. On the 4th day, the 5th day, more elemental assessments were given. However, among elements such as water, lightning, earth, and metal, only some of the elements were tested. Elements such as thunder and water. They were all related to the super treasures of the corresponding attributes, but Su Hao thought that those treasures were all slightly inferior to Holy Flame. The intelligence points required to unlock the other elements were also slightly lower. There were also not many things that they could comprehend from the other elements. The time that Duke Andre left for them was shortened from 24 hours to 12 hours. Naturally, with Butterfly's excellence, and with Su Hao's extraordinary eyesight, analysis, and deduction abilities, the sprites each had their own gains. Their results in each round were also enough to rank some of them the top 5 or even top 3. The reason for the ambiguity was due to a lack of ranking given by the Duke Andre. Apart from the first day of the soul power test where Su Hao was able to surpass everyone else with 6 different abnormal phenomenons, it wasn't certain that Su Hao came first in the other tests. especially the comprehension of holy flames the next day. As a wood element and illusion element, Butterfly comprehended two characteristics. Although it could get a very high score, Sun's results were also very outstanding. The comprehension of the three fire element sprites from Sun's team might be lower than Butterfly's, but it was higher than Ayan's. Dazed Crow? It was even further behind compared to the others. Sun himself also cheated by casting flames that could heal sprites. On that day, it was not easy to tell who among the two had better results. In the third and fourth assessments, Sun was undoubtedly suppressed by Su Hao, but the winter singer from Russia, a girl with short brown hair and a strong aura, had also achieved good results. Some nosy people gave a rough ranking. First place, Dragon Nation, 6 God. Second place, Golden Eagle Federation, Sun. Third place, White Bear Nation, Winter Singer. 8th place, Dragon Nation, Wind Whisperer. 11th, Dragon Nation, Sword God. The top 3 were in a stalemate. Many sprite trainers from the Golden Eagle Federation and the White Bear Nation did not agree with the ranking. Su Hao didn't dare to be careless. After all, in the top 10, other than himself, everyone else probably knew how to cheat. If it was a real-life PK, anyone could beat him. If there was a specific ranking, he believed that even if he was first, his score wouldn't be much higher than the Son of the Sun and the Winter Singer. Su Hao was naturally competitive and wanted to compete. Moreover, every round of assessment was beneficial. However, when did people start calling me the 6 God? Why not just call me 6 God Flower Dew? Su Hao looked at a certain busybody, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Bai Xiaoming, the busybody, coughed dryly. Well, you didn't have a title at first, and in the first stage, you showed 6 abnormal phenomenons with the demeanor of a great god. So, we came up with a plan to give you the title of 6 God. Don't you think it's very domineering? Foreign sprite trainers all praised it when they heard it. Could it be that Su Hao would have to be called the 6 God Heavenly King in the future? No, absolutely not. Su Hao thought about how others would call him that in the future and quickly shook his head. Besides, according to his speculation, if he contracted a 7th or 8th sprite in the future, wouldn't he have to be called 7 God or 8 God? I haven't even thought of a title yet and I've already become famous. Sigh, how annoying. On the 6th day, the 5th assessment. It was a very conventional assessment, but it was beneficial to every sprite. Soul assessment. In front of you is an ancient battlefield. Duke Andre pointed ahead at the ruins shrouded in fog and said, as long as you step into the ruins, you will be subjected to mental torture. It's both an illusion and reality. The Duke turned around and looked at them, saying, the test of the mind is your heart, your will, and your soul. Don't think that you won't be affected just because your spiritual power is strong and your mastery of illusions is well developed. It isn't the same thing. Similarly, he paused and said meaningfully, the protective barrier of sprite trainers can be affected by mental torture. The deeper you go, the stronger the pressure the ancient ruins put on your mind. You will step into the ruins with the sprites and move forward. The farther you go, the better you are. If anyone stops or can't hold on, it also means that they have failed. Now, is there a problem? Duke, if we fall into the illusion, will there be consequences? The battlefield ruins can cleanse your souls. As long as you don't challenge it too much, there won't be any problems. Duke Andre looked at the others. Since there's no problem, let's begin. Find your place. The battlefield ruins covered a wide area. Hundreds of people and thousands of sprites scattered to various locations and came to the edge of the ruins. Beneath Su Hao's feet was a smooth and neat stone slab. Further ahead was the ancient ruin. Under the cover of the thick fog, some dilapidated walls could be vaguely seen. Bronze pillars were broken and collapsed, and bricks and tiles were shattered on the ground. However, looking at it with the naked eye, it seemed no different from ordinary ruins. Even if one used some extraordinary techniques to try to look past the mist, one wouldn't be able to see through it. At this moment, a young man not far away had already beckoned his sprite to enter the ruins. The first master hound that stepped in instantly trembled. After a while, it took a step and then another. The death locust that was flying in midair couldn't avoid being affected either. It fell from midair and twitched for a while before getting up and continuing forward. At the same time, an ugly youth took a deep breath and stepped forward. He froze. 10 seconds later, he fell flat on his back. Su Hao was speechless. Was the test too difficult, or was the plain and ugly youth too weak? Of course, it was the latter. At this moment, many people had already taken the first step and stood firm. Butterfly and the others also set off to scout. Butterfly and Crow were still flying in the air. Boom! Su Hao took a step forward. In an instant, the scene in front of him changed rapidly like a slideshow. It was as if something exploded in his mind, making him unable to resist saying, "That's it! That's it!" If he had to describe his current feeling, he would say that it felt as if a gust of wind had blown past. It had no effect on him. To draw a comparison, it was weaker than the pressure he faced when spending intelligence points to unlock information. He was long used to it. In the beginning, the difficulty of mental torture lies in being caught off guard, but after getting used to it, you can at least walk a lengthy distance. At this moment, someone took the second and third steps, and the time they stopped was getting shorter and shorter. Su Hao didn't delay any longer. Who knew if there was an end to this ruin? He took firm steps forward, one step at a time. His powerful soul power resisted the impact of the mysterious power, and the chaotic illusions in his mind instantly shattered. He walked faster and faster, pressing forward and leaving the other sprite trainers behind. He caught up with some sprites that were walking faster. Then, he walked past the big fat bear without stopping. The big fat bear! The big fat bear, boo-hoo! It cried out, but it didn't dare to walk too fast. The continuous spiritual impact had already made its white and fat body sway a little. Even if it wore the Thunder God battlesuit, it wouldn't help in resisting the mental torture at all. The big fat bear was about to cry. It was like a pitiful child weighing thousands of pounds. How embarrassing! Su Hao gave him a look and continued forward. At this moment, the ones flying at the front were Butterfly and Dazed Crow. The previously humiliated Crow wanted to save face and flew forward at a low speed. They were very stable and did not need to land. It was a speed that Su Hao could not catch up to for the time being. Suddenly, a golden figure appeared not far away and continued to walk forward. It was Sword God. He held the Sword Master in his hand and a faint golden light enveloped his body. He exuded a sharp sword aura and strode forward. The Sword God has always been very strong. If it weren't for his lack of sprites, his ranking would have risen by several places. Su Hao continued to move forward at a speed similar to Sword God. According to his estimation, he should have already walked a few hundred meters. Looking back, he could only see a figure not far away from him. Gurgle! Butterfly's cry came from ahead. Su Hao looked over. The fog was even thicker. There were many figures stopping there. Most of them were sprites, but on the left, Su Hao saw a familiar figure. The figure also looked back. It was the Sun's son. Before long, footsteps came from the right, followed by a few sprites. The woman from White Bear Nation also followed closely behind. There were also a few contestants with strong souls and willpower who appeared one after another. At this point, the real test had just begun. Su Hao paused for a moment and strode forward. In the sky, Duke Andre's gaze passed through the thick fog and looked at everyone. Which of you will be able to walk to the end? Chapter 328, Charging Towards the Destination, the Last Assessment. The Heavenly King's leaders from many countries used various methods to come above the ruins of the ancient battlefield. Their gazes passed through the thick fog and looked at the outstanding juniors from their own countries. Li Jiangxuan's will is firm and his mind is strong. In time, he will definitely step into the Heavenly King level, and become an expert among them. In the sky, the Heavenly King Lai Kong looked at the young man holding the sword. His words carried the joy of seeing an outstanding junior. He hoped that more powerful comrades would appear in Dragon Nation and the entire Union in the future. Su Hao and Lan Qing's performance is also unexpectedly good. Most of the members of the Dragon Nation team were above 25 years of age. They had been on the battlefield and had a lot of experience fighting against ferocious terrorist organizations like the Dark Society. Their mind and willpower naturally wouldn't be too bad. Only Su Hao and Lan Qing were only university students, and only second-year students. It was hard to say how far their sprites could go, but Heavenly King Lai Kong and the others were initially more worried towards the two of them. "Looks like we were worried for nothing," said Heavenly King Gongling. "Young people nowadays are indeed more outstanding with each generation. Their sprites perform well, their souls show many abnormal phenomenons, and their hearts are also very firm and strong. In time, they might reach the crown level." Crown level. It's just my hope. After all, the birth of every crown level sprite trainer is talent, hard work, and luck. All of which are essential, especially luck. When they started talking about luck, Heavenly King Lai Kong sighed. "Back then, I was also a genius who fought my way out of the Supernova Cup, but..." Even though he was already an expert among Heavenly Kings, he still couldn't see the path to the crown level. It was unreachable. Mist shrouded the ancient ruins. Golden Flame raised his foot and crossed an obstacle. There seemed to be a buzzing demonic sound echoing in his mind, but he looked into the distance at the gradually disappearing figures. He still didn't want to stop for a moment. Gritting his teeth, he took another step forward. The ancient ruins were roughly fan-shaped, and the starting point of the Korean nation was not far from the Dragon Nation. After walking only 100 to 200 meters, Golden Flame met a figure that was symbolically engraved in his heart. Su Hao. The figure was dozens of meters away from him. It wasn't clear in the fog, but Golden Flame was very sure that it was the person who had defeated him time and time again. The figure didn't stop walking. In his vision, it gradually disappeared into the distance. Golden Flame clenched his fists and gritted his teeth to clear his mind before continuing forward. No, he couldn't even see his back. Thud. Thud. There were some sounds where his feet stepped. The view of the figure's back in his eyes gradually became blurry, and his vision turned black. The demonic sound in his ears kept hitting his head like a huge hammer. Golden Flame raised its foot and landed again. It trembled violently, as if it had fallen into a bottomless abyss. How can this be? In the sky, a Korean Heavenly King's eyes widened. Golden Flame should be able to reach the middle at the very least. The start, middle, and end. Starting from the middle, the mental torture of the mind was greatly enhanced. In the eyes of the Korean Heavenly King, Golden Flame, a junior whom he thought highly of, should at least be able to reach the middle. Being able to reach the middle meant that one's willpower was firm. Although the mind had nothing to do with whether one could become an expert. However, the Union had calculated that those who could reach the middle before the age of 30 were very likely to become Heavenly Kings. On the contrary. Golden Flame, you're too impatient. Strange, why do I feel like I heard someone calling me? Did you guys hear it? Gurgle. Su Hao turned his head and looked back. In the misty fog, figures struggled to move forward. Who was calling him? It was probably just his imagination. No, it was an illusion. Su Hao's heart skipped a beat. This ruin is really too powerful. I clearly didn't feel anything, but I actually fell for it unknowingly. I have to be careful. He patted his face, summoned the interface, took a few looks, and continued forward. The mist in front was much thicker. As Su Hao moved forward, in an instant, the thick mist seemed to surge and roll, turning into a dragon's roar, as if a demon king was looking down at him. Su Hao stood on the spot for a full 1.5 seconds. Only then could he take the second step. At this moment, in front of him, Sun, Sword God, and the others were also much slower. Su Hao looked back. Among the people he knew was Xia. Not far from him, Lan Qing's figure also appeared from afar, about to cross the middle position. There weren't many people who could see it, but there were quite a lot of sprites. In terms of resistance, sprites were still stronger. Well. He glanced at the interface. The big fat bear is truly a disappointment. Apart from the bear, the other sprites were all beside Su Hao, while the dumb unicorn was slightly behind. Butterfly and Dazed Crow still had energy left. From now on, he probably wouldn't have the energy to pay attention to anything else. He thought and said to Butterfly and Dazed Crow, "You guys go ahead." Gurgle. Squawk. On the ruins, Su Hao walked forward step by step, but it was as if his body was already buried deep in mud. Every time he raised his foot, he felt increasingly heavy. Endless thoughts surfaced in his mind, flashing like slides. The scene in front of him was gradually becoming blurry. He was only relying on his instincts to move forward mechanically. Step by step. He didn't know how long he had walked or how far he had walked. He only felt as if he had crossed mountains and seas, passed through a sea of people, vast and endless. Finally, Su Hao stepped on a broken tile. His body became unstable, and he plunged forward. He reached out to brace for impact and let his body fall. There was no resentment. There was no hesitation. But in an instant, he seemed to wake up. Not far away, Sun, who had also fallen, happened to look over and smile. It was as if it was saying, "I won." Their positions weren't too far apart, but indeed, it was the Sun, who was a little closer. However, Su Hao barely raised his head and glanced into the distance. Its palm-sized body had already returned to its original state. Its emerald green butterfly wings flapped as it gracefully flew at the front. It moved ahead, even leaving behind the fire god soldier that was emitting porcelain-colored light. Sun took a look and immediately froze. Unable to hold on any longer, he fainted on the spot. Bang! Su Hao leaned on his arm and fell asleep. Your Dragon Nation's Li Jianxian has a pretty good heart and will. At this point, most of the sprite trainers had already fallen. The human who walked the furthest was Li Jianxian, who was holding a long sword. The young man named Sword God. However, what really surprised me was that butterfly fairy. If I remember correctly, it's the first butterfly fairy in the world. Its current age is less than 3 years old. You're right, replied the heavenly king Lai Kong. Impressive. Just like humans, the more the sprites experienced, the more mature their minds became. Only then could they go further in the mental torture. Butterfly Fairy, who wasn't even 3 years old, had a slight advantage as an illusion element sprite, but to have maintained the lead of first place came as a shock to Duke André. The old man looked at Su Hao, who had already fallen unconscious, his eyes filled with admiration. To be able to nurture such outstanding sprites, this young man is indeed very impressive. Gurgle. Butterfly called out in its heart, but it couldn't get a response. But its instinct told it that the stupid Su Hao shouldn't be in danger. After thinking about it, it directly used its psychic power to control the cell phone in his pocket and tagged Ayan, Fu, and Dumb Unicorn, whose location shouldn't be far from Su Hao's. No one answered. After a while, Ayan sent a butterfly was in a daze for a long time before looking at the dazed crow flying behind, its flaming feather robe flickering. Butterfly thought that they probably didn't have the strength to take out their cell phones. Gurgle. It continued forward. At this moment, Butterfly had already landed. Its long boots made of vines and leaves stepped on the messy ground and walked forward with light steps. Mixed illusions appeared in its mind but were instantly destroyed. Butterfly looked ahead. Its little face didn't change, only the antennae on its head swayed. Suddenly, there was a thud behind him. It looked back and saw the dazed crow dozens of meters away. Dazed Crow couldn't stand it anymore and fell head first. The fire god soldier who was closer to Butterfly and was in second place had also disappeared. The flames on its body were like candles in the wind. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. After struggling to take a few steps, it finally couldn't stand it anymore and sank into the illusion. Gurgle. It seemed like it was the only sprite left in its field of vision. It didn't know how much further it was from the end. Butterfly's little face puffed up as it placed its hands on its hips and sighed. It should be reaching its limit. A heavenly king in the sky said. Before he finished speaking, his eyes widened. In their eyes, Butterfly Fairy, who was originally advancing at turtle speed, suddenly. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps. It started walking quickly. It was more than 2 to 3 times faster than before. It moved forward with grace. It was like walking on flat ground, not affected at all. Of course, it was impossible for Butterfly to not be affected. It was more or less affected. In the misty fog, it seemed to be the only figure left in the world. Demonic sounds lingered in its ears. Illusion-like but real visuals kept flashing in front of its eyes. Butterfly reached out and grabbed the cell phone in its pocket. When it thought of Su Hao, the dazed crow, and the others, its footsteps became even more firm. It stepped on the ground and made thud-thud sounds. It was the only sound in the world. It sounded like the beating of a human heart. After some time, it was as if a long time had passed. It was also as if it was just a trance and it had only been a short while. At one point, light appeared, and the hazy mist was left behind. Thunderous demonic sounds. The illusions. They all disappeared in an instant. When Butterfly recovered from its half-awake state, it realized that it had already passed through the ruins. It had arrived at the opposite side. Behind it, the ruins were covered in mist. In front of it was an open space with neatly paved stone slabs. There were a few figures in the open space. Butterfly recognized a few of them. Heavenly King Lai Kong, the leader of the Dragon Nation. The old master Duke Andre, who was rumored to be very strong. But at this moment, their expressions seemed a little off. Their eyes seemed to have bulged out. Their mouths were so big that they could swallow a cell phone. Butterfly was very puzzled. What are they looking at? Gurgle. Across the ancient ruins, at the exit, Duke Andre was silent for a long time. In his eyes, Butterfly Fairy was very outstanding. The Grand Duke wouldn't find it strange if it maintained the lead and firmly took first place in the soul trial. But in second place, the location where the fire god soldier fell was only at the far end of the middle section. There was still a long distance to the finishing point. The Grand Duke originally thought that Butterfly Fairy would fall a few dozen meters ahead of the fire god soldier. Even then, it was already much more impressive than the other genius sprites. However, Duke Andre, who was in the air at that time, saw Butterfly Fairy continue to move forward with its long boots without any rest. With every step, the pressure exerted by the ancient ruins on its body increased. Before long, the Butterfly Fairy in his eyes was in a half-awake state, as if it could collapse at any moment. But this continued. It continued for 10 whole minutes. It was clearly already at its limit, but it seemed like its limit was constantly increasing. In the end, when they saw Butterfly Fairy gradually approaching the finishing point, Duke Andre and the Heavenly Kings of Dragon Nation were all excited. They couldn't help but come to the finishing point and wait. They were looking forward to its arrival. They hoped that Butterfly Fairy could really take the final step. But when Butterfly Fairy really walked out of the ancient ruins and arrived in front of them, at that moment, it seemed a bit unreal. Sunlight shone. The emerald green butterfly flapped its wings lightly, and Butterfly looked as if it had been reborn. Gurgle. A pleasant cry echoed in the wind. On the other side of the ancient ruins, outside the fan-shaped entrance, Sprite trainers and sprites were being dragged out and thrown out. After that, they woke up and shook their heads. Su Hao came out earlier than these people. He walked quickly and fainted quickly. But when his body was dragged out of the ancient ruins, he naturally woke up from his deep sleep in a short while. He wasn't sleepy. There was no fatigue. It was as if he had had a good sleep and a good dream. When he woke up, his entire spirit and appearance were different. His mood also became happy. Is this the cleansing of the soul? It seems to have purified my soul. It was more useful for sprites. On the interface, the spiritual power of the dazed crow and the others had all increased slightly, but there were still some benefits that weren't directly reflected in their attributes. Only after trying it out did he realize. The dazed crow's fire crow slash had become stronger, and there were more slashes. It was hard to explain, but it had a similar charm to the sword god. Fu, Ayan, and the others benefited less. Big Fat Bear. Sob, sob, sob. Its fair and chubby body was squatting with its hands behind its head. Even though it was squatting, it was still 2 meters tall. The bear seemed pitiful, weak, and looked like it wanted to play its games. No way. I've decided to arrange some resistance training for you in the future. Sob. Ignoring the big fat bear's cries, Su Hao looked towards the thick fog. It was as if he could see the emerald green figure advancing step by step in the depths. Until Butterfly rushed out of the ancient ruins. A ding-dong prompt also sounded in Su Hao's ears. Ding-dong, your sprite, Butterfly Fairy, has comprehended dream ability from the mental torture. Dream ability, under the mystical state of half asleep and half awake, spiritual power, illusion abilities, and invasion ability of dreams have increased greatly. Remarks: this ability is currently unstable. It seems to be a powerful ability. It doesn't matter if it's unstable, I'll just modify it into a secret manual. This ancient ruin is pretty awesome. It's just a challenge, but I got so many benefits from it. As expected of the Union, its foundation is indeed different. It's just a pity that I could only get the benefits once. If only I could challenge a few more times and get the same benefits every time. While Su Hao was thinking, the palm-sized butterfly in the distance circled around and landed on his head. Gurgle, gurgle. The matter of Butterfly charging straight out of the finishing point in the ancient ruins didn't cause much of a stir. Because, not many people knew. Everyone was still immersed in the comfort of waking up from the illusion. They didn't have any thoughts or abilities to pay attention to others. Only a small number. For example, the Sun who heard about Butterfly's results. How is this possible? He was extremely shocked. The Heavenly King of the Golden Eagle Federation patted his shoulder. This isn't your fault. It's not that you're not outstanding enough, but that Butterfly Fairy. After pausing for a while, the Heavenly King seemed to be at a loss of words and couldn't finish his description. He could only console the Sun. Butterfly Fairy has an advantage in the 5th round of the assessment, but in the next round and the final round of the assessment, you might be able to win a round. The Heavenly King's words made the Sun look up. He was well aware that the Heavenly King was comforting him. In the ancient ruins, Butterfly Fairy didn't have an advantage over him, but its results still left him in the dust. But in tomorrow's assessment, he indeed had a huge advantage. The advantage in strength. I didn't want to, but It's not only for me, but also for the Federation. I have to get first place tomorrow and achieve an overwhelming result. The final assessment. Real combat was carried out in a special environment, in the Elemental Lake. Chapter 329, in terms of strength, only the Sword God in Dragon Nation is worth paying attention to. On the last day of the inheritance battle, the actual battle was held in a special area in the city of Glow Elemental Lake. There weren't a few hundred participants in the final combat assessment, but only 20 to 30 people who had passed the screening and still had a chance of qualifying. In the Dragon Nation, apart from Su Hao, only Li Jianxian, Lan Qing, and Xia were qualified to participate. For the others, such as Bai Xiaoming and Lin, their performance in the first few rounds of the assessment was relatively ordinary. According to the tallying of the scores, even if they obtained the top 3 and first place in the last round of the assessment, their total score would still make it difficult for them to reach the top 7. Besides, I still know my limits. In terms of strength, I can't even be ranked in the top 3 in our Dragon Nation team, let alone facing the geniuses of the world. Bai Xiaoming said, as for you, as long as you don't fight too badly, the inheritance slot won't run away. You basically already have a slot guaranteed. I have a feeling that you are trying to pick a fight, but I am not too certain. But according to Su Hao's own estimation, it was indeed true. No matter how he calculated, a person as outstanding as him was definitely guaranteed a slot. However, Su Hao had to remain humble. Su Hao waved his hand. I'm only 99% sure that I'll get a slot. It's not a sure thing yet. I still need to work hard. He continued to say, before Bai Xiaoming's mouth twitched, speaking of which, what's the situation with the elemental lake? He originally wanted to ask the Heavenly King Lai Kong. But the big bosses like Heavenly King Lai Kong were busy giving pointers to Lan Qing, Li Jianxian, and Xia before the battle, along with some tips on tactics. Only he. You don't need anything. You just need to perform at your usual level. Heavenly King Lai Kong had said so back then. Do you have so much confidence in my abilities? What if my stomach suddenly hurts, or if my head feels dizzy? Oh, my sprites would still be fine, never mind. Hearing Su Hao's question, Bai Xiaoming couldn't help but feel puzzled. Nevertheless, he still answered the question in detail. As the name suggests, the Lake of Elements is a lake filled with countless elements of various attributes. At this point, Bai Xiaoming paused and also sighed. I don't have much expectations for the inheritance slot, but I am quite eager to go to the elemental lake. In that environment of endless elements, unique skills can be used at will, their power multiplied by dozens of times, and vast elements can be triggered with a single thought. It's very beneficial to the elemental control of sprites and their own improvement. It's the same as the previous assessments. It's both an assessment and a benefit, but I reckon that fighting on the elemental lake will consume a lot of elemental energy there. It's also possible that there wasn't enough time for everyone, so they decided to eliminate ordinary contestants like us. How sad, I can't breathe. So that was why. Su Hao didn't care if Bai Xiaoming was in pain or not. He roughly understood the situation of the assessment tomorrow. Real combat was naturally the most direct test method, but this battle was still different from other battles. The biggest difference was probably ordinary battles in the Union of Sprite Trainers had its limitations, whereas the battle at Elemental Lake allowed infinite firepower. The energy one could use was almost endless. The cooldown time was greatly reduced. The power of the unique skill was much greater. Thinking about it this way, he was also looking forward to it. White Bear Nation, Conference Room. There were only 8 people in the entire meeting room. 4 Heavenly Kings and 4 contestants who were qualified to participate in the battle at Elemental Lake the next day. One of the 4 was Arya Winter Singer. And 3 young men that will currently remain nameless. They were looking ahead. On the big screen, the information of the participating sprite trainers from other countries was displayed. A Heavenly King who was even more muscular than the White Bear and had a thunder drum printed on his coat said, "The thing you need to pay the most attention to tomorrow is Golden Eagle Federation's Sun. He looked at the 3 ordinary young men. If you meet him, I'll allow you to choose to preserve your strength. To put it simply, he allowed them to admit defeat. If they couldn't win, they would just admit defeat. This way, they could still conceal their trump card. A slightly thin young man from the White Bear tribe was a little unconvinced when he heard the Heavenly King's words. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Heavenly King Thunderdrum threw out the information in his hand. 2 months ago, Adolf, the Sun's son, made a record. At that time, his ace sprite, Fire God Soldier, defeated a quasi-Heavenly King instructor at the Bull Royal College in a head-on battle. According to speculation and analysis, the Fire God Soldier has already stepped into Pseudo-Monarch rank. Pseudo-Monarch rank. At the extraordinary stage, Sprites needed a vast amount of resources to grow, and there was also a bottleneck. Even if their sprites had already consumed many high-level materials, it still wasn't likely for them to reach Pseudo-Monarch rank. The Fire God Soldier was already at a high level. If it was true that they only had a slight chance of competing with the Sun's son in the previous rounds of the assessment, then there was indeed no chance of them winning tomorrow's battle. The few young men who knew their own strength already had no objections. Even the strongest of the four, the winter aria singer, Bella, could only barely fight against the Sun's son. What about the sprite trainers of Dragon Nation? A young man asked. Among the Dragon Nation team, the Six God, the Wind Speaker, and the Sword God, are all experts ranked in the top 10, especially. He glanced at the short brown-haired Bella. The performance of the Six God in many assessments was even more dazzling than the performance of Bella and the Sun's son. They didn't dare to underestimate him at all. Upon hearing this, Heavenly King Thunderdrum pressed the remote control in his hand. On the screen, 4 avatars enlarged. They were the avatars of the 4 young sprite trainers from Dragon Nation who were qualified to participate in the battle tomorrow. From left to right, in order, Six God, Wind Speaker, Sword God, Xia. Dragon Nation, it truly is filled with geniuses. When he thought of Su Hao and Lan Qing, the 2 especially young sprite trainers, Heavenly King Thunderdrum couldn't help but sigh. Their current new generation was still inferior to the Dragon Nation, but the Six God and the Wind Speaker are both very outstanding young people that will do very well in the future. However, right now, they are too young. Their strength isn't top-notch in the inheritance battle. As Heavenly King Thunderdrum spoke, the big screen showed Su Hao and Lan Qing's battle information from a few months ago. Images from the high school league. Not strong. Of course, with their improvement speed, they still can't be underestimated. It's just that compared to the 2 of them, Sword God and Xia are more of a threat among the Dragon Nation's participants. Especially Sword God Li Jianqian. He has become one with the sword and has already become a sword force. He should be the strongest person in the Dragon Nation team. He's also the one you need to pay attention to the most. The few of them nodded. Looking at the pictures of Sun Sun, Sword God, and the others, their gaze was filled with seriousness. The next day, north of the city of Glow, at the Elemental Lake, hundreds of sprite trainers from various countries gathered again, but today, most of the hundreds of geniuses were just spectators. They looked at the 20 to 30 people standing at the front. The top geniuses in the Supernova Cup. These were the true main characters of the day. Chapter 330, Butterfly's Infinite Bombardment. Is this the Elemental Lake? Su Hao stood at the edge of the cliff. As he gazed ahead, he saw that it was a huge lake without water. The whole lake was like a colorful mirror. Mist of all colors floated on the surface of the lake. Upon closer inspection, one could discover that this mist was high in purity and was substantialized elemental energy. It was so dense that it could be seen with the naked eye. These nearly infinite elemental particles floated irregularly on the lake and in mid-air, but miraculously, the mutually repulsive energy elements didn't conflict because of this. It was as if there was an invisible force enveloping and restricting the rich elemental particles within the range of the elemental lake. It was beautiful and magnificent, a world wonder. After stopping for a while, Duke Andre's iron tower-like body appeared in their eyes. Today is the final assessment. The results of the assessment will be calculated together with the previous 5 rounds. In the end, the 7 most outstanding among you can head to the Holy Temple to receive the inheritance. Today's assessment will be carried out on the Lake of Elements. It will test your true strength and use of the environment. The assessment mode will be an irregular team battle. Now, let's not talk too much. Let's start drawing lots to fight. Before long, the first battle began. It was 2 young insignificant sprite trainers from unknown countries whose names he didn't know. Youth A had 4 extraordinary levels, and they were good at using wood element consumption tactics. Youth B also had 4 extraordinary levels, mainly water element and wave tactics. The battle lasted for 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Youth A was completely defeated. The 2 of them have similar strength. There wouldn't be such a big difference in a normal battle, but in the environment of the elemental lake, the waves created by the wave tactics were more than 10 times stronger. On the contrary, although Youth A's recovery ability and wood element plants were much stronger than in normal environments, they still couldn't withstand the increasingly ferocious waves. In the end, the Vinewood defense collapsed and was swept away by the wave. This battle example tells us that you need variety, a rich tactical system, and different battle patterns according to different environments. Su Hao thought. Then, he thought about his current team battle system. It seemed that only Butterfly and Ayan could combine their skills. Dumb Unicorn and Big Fat Bear could also use Thunder Rain Kylan. The rest seemed to be fighting on their own. Well, whatever. As long as everybody is happy. Second round, Dragon Nation Su Hao, battle, White Bear Nation XXX. A Union Heavenly King who was the judge shouted. Immediately, many eyes looked over. Heavenly King Lycong patted his shoulder. Fight well. And yesterday you told me to fight casually. Su Hao had a faint expression. After straightening his clothes, he rode the dumb unicorn down the cliff and landed on the calm lake of elements. The hooves of the dumb unicorn stepped on the ground, making doo-doo sounds as if it was stepping on ice. It was curious, but it couldn't help but knock on the ice. Opposite, a sprite trainer from White Bear Nation also landed on his sprite. He looked at the 6 god, and his gaze stopped on the 6 sprites for a moment. He has 6 extraordinary level sprites, and the genius of White Bear Nation himself only had 4 extraordinary beings: Blazing Lobster, 3-headed Hound, Red Ball Cat, and the Hell Warhorse. They were all fire element. They were good at frontal bombardment and sneak attacks from the side. But my sprites have been at the extraordinary level for more than 5 years. Even the weaker ones have been at the extraordinary level for more than 2 years. They are all experienced extraordinary level sprites, and their development level is higher than his. At the thought of this and Heavenly King Thunder Drum's analysis of the 6 god last night, he was filled with confidence. At this moment, both parties had already entered the arena. The judge flying in the air waved his flag. Battle, begin. On the calm lake, the 7-colored mist stirred. The 2 people and 10 sprites quickly approached. When the distance shortened to more than 1,000 meters, the sprite trainer of the White Bear Nation attacked brazenly. Explosive Fireball. The sprites such as the Inferno Lobster, the 3-headed Hound, and the others glowed with red light. Endless fire elements were drawn over. Hot fireballs that were 1 or 2 times larger than usual formed in an instant and flew out. It carried a terrifying might. It's comparable to pseudo-monarch rank. Looking at the fireball flying over and still expanding halfway, Su Hao started to think. The other party wasn't the only one who received the enhancement from the elemental lake. Instantly, the dazed crow activated its flaming feather form. Bright flaming blade aura flew out and expanded in the wind. It was dozens of meters long. It directly cut through 2 huge fireballs and collided with the third one, exploding with a boom. You have some ability. The sprite trainer of the White Bear Nation thought. He also knew that the Flaming Spirit Crow was the only 2 powerful sprites the 6 god had. So, continue to bombard, Don't give the other side a chance to catch their breath. An explosive fireball 3 to 4 meters in diameter, a roaring flame dragon more than 10 to 20 meters long, a thick and terrifying pillar of flames that directly shot through a distance of 1,000 meters. Compared to the power of ordinary battles, it was several times stronger, more than 10 times stronger. It was like a calamity that covered the sky. Dumb Unicorn and Big Fat Bear were about to execute their combination moves when... Gurgle, gurgle! Butterfly called out. Its eyes were bright, and with the joy of discovering a fun toy, it stopped Unicorn and Bear. It returned to its original state and stretched out its white palm. 3 fist-sized precious balls lined up and floated on both sides of its palm. The next moment, in front of his palm, 2 energy balls appeared at an almost instantaneous speed. They flew out, and then energy balls appeared. Like 2 cannon muzzles, they continuously spat out energy balls. But not only that. At the same time that Butterfly used energy balls on its palms, energy balls also appeared in front of the 3 white precious balls. They flew out, appeared again, and flew out again. It went from a 2-fold casting to a 5-fold casting. 5 instantaneous artillery towers. When the first energy ball flew halfway and had yet to collide with the explosive fireball and the roaring flame dragon, Butterfly had already blasted out more than 100 energy balls at a uniform speed. No, the speed was actually gradually increasing. Butterfly was improving. Boom 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 boom. Smoke and dust exploded in the sky, and a terrifying storm swept 1,000 meters, enveloping both of them. Amidst the smoke and dust, explosions kept sounding. One could vaguely see red and green energy lights constantly colliding. He's actually on par with me in terms of firepower output? Isn't it said that the 6 god was too young, and the sprites aren't strong? The sprite trainer of the White Bear Nation was rather surprised. So were the heavenly kings of the White Bear Nation watching from the cliff. The sprite trainers in the field couldn't see the whole picture, but they were very clear that the one fighting against the White Bear Nation's sprite trainers' firepower wasn't Suhao's entire sprite team. Butterfly Fairy was the only sprite that was fighting. How can its casting speed be so fast? Even if elemental energy is very easy to guide, it still needs a little time, right? Wait, in the information, isn't Butterfly Fairy a sprite skilled in illusion? What exactly is the person in charge of collecting intelligence doing? He's gotten everything wrong. No, I think that maybe that Butterfly Fairy hid its abilities too deeply. Illusion only scratches the surface of its power. Look at the degree of compression of the energy ball, speed of casting, control. These can't be cultivated without a few years of effort. Especially the precious ball that can assist in casting spells, the secret manual was undoubtedly prepared for it. What it, Butterfly Fairy, is really good at is probably, frontal bombardment. Gulp. The Heavenly King of the White Bear Nation's analysis was very reasonable. This made many sprite trainers vigilant and think. What should they do if they encountered such an unreasonable fire suppression? Only the sprite trainers of the Dragon Nation team acted as if they had heard something funny. They wanted to laugh, but they had to hold it in. At this moment, the real infinite firepower made Butterfly very happy, but after all, there was a time limit for the battle. The opponent was also changing its tactics. A red ball cat was quietly approaching. In that case, let's end it. Gurgle. Butterfly put its hands together, and wisps of grey mist floated out, turning into 2 figures identical to it, standing on both sides. At the same time, amidst a series of cheers and laughter, the Big Fat Bear, Dumb Unicorn, and Dazed Crow attacked together. A huge bluish-purple light ball pushed out horizontally. A water dragon dozens of meters long roared. Hot slashes flew out. Bright light blossomed to the limit. The energy shock wave had already spread for thousands of meters, sweeping up a terrifying storm tide. All kinds of energy particles surged, as if doomsday had arrived. Boom! Extreme light! Extreme rumbling! When everything dissipated, there were only a few heavily injured sprites and sprite trainers from the White Bear Nation who were brought thousands of meters away by the Hell Warhorse, but the light of the protective screen had already dimmed. The White Bear Nation's sprite trainer's face was dull. It was clearly not like this just a moment ago.